And I will take a bit of questions if anyone has them. Tim asks, would it be possible to cover strict control over what pages display within an Auto-Nav on a per block basis? Could you explain maybe a little bit more, like a particular use case or something along those lines that you might have in mind? Because I'm not sure I totally follow, although I can imagine. I will set up another Auto-Nav just in the time being. Sure. Yeah, I can definitely explain how the Auto-Nav might how you might control what pages show up in a particular Auto-Nav. That's actually an excellent point. So I can do this using our newly I can use this I can do this using our new awesome drop-down menu template. So let's say I head on into my About page, which has Contact Us and Guest Book beneath it. And just to make this clearer, I'm going to remove, whoops. I'm not going to show any subpages. Just to make it simpler. Okay, so we've got Contact Us and Guest Book. And, you know, let's say you obviously you have these pages out for a reason. You want to show them in the nav. You don't want to exclude them from the nav, but you don't necessarily, let's say you want them to show up here, but you don't want them to show up here. You don't want Contact Us in your header. You want Guest Book to show up, but you don't want Contact Us in the header. Now what you could do, of course, since we built our Auto-Nav off of the existing template, you could just add exclude from nav up to here, and that would, of course, well, that should. I feel like I did not do it right. Oh, I'm actually, let that be a lesson to you. So I forgot that I actually have the replace link with first in nav on the Contact Us page, which is why it was taking us to the child pages, which is not really what I want at this point. So I'm going to remove that custom attribute, and I'm going to go back to the About page, and I'm going to go back to Contact Us. This looks much more promising already. And I'm going to exclude from nav. And then if I mouse over here, Contact Us is gone from the header, but unfortunately it's also gone from the left nav. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to undo that because that's not what I want. I want to keep it in the navs. I want it everywhere in the site, in the navs. I just don't want it in the drop-down menu. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use page attributes. So this is where you can start to use your own custom attributes to control what pages might show up in a custom footer nav, anything of those nature, in that nature. So you're going to want to use a checkbox attribute. This is just basically an on or an off. And I'm going to call this exclude drop-down nav instead of exclude from nav. Exclude from drop-down menu is its name. And now I can go back to the Contact Us page, properties. I can add in exclude from drop-down menu, and I can hit save. Now, it would be pretty awesome if that just magically worked because I haven't actually done any code changes. So it'd be pretty cool if it somehow knew what I was trying to do, but it does not. So this is just an attribute, an arbitrary bit of data associated with this page, but we have to actually modify our templates to take advantage of it. Fortunately, that's pretty easy. And this is why we created our own custom drop-down menu template so that we could do stuff like this. If I open view.php, let's see, you can see, we'll go through this, and you can see right here, if get collection attribute value equals exclude nav, we don't show anything inside it. So what we're going to do is or if it does not equal exclude nav, we do process it. So what we're going to do is we're going to actually add in some extra logic. And C stands for collection, which is how we refer to concrete5 pages sometimes. So get collection attribute value, exclude drop down nav. This is just, you just pass through the handle, and it returns, since it's a checkbox attribute, it returns true or false. So now we're basically saying, if it's not exclude from nav and it's not exclude from drop-down nav, then we show it, which means that exclude from nav will still work with this menu. So now if I go back to contact us, still shows up there, but guestbook no longer shows underneath about. So you can see right there, that's an easy way of doing something like that, and it really you can use attributes to modify how these auto-navs display for a lot of flexibility. Tim also clarifies we have to manually exclude blog posts from the dropdown each time a post is created. One thing that you might do is, if you find that that's the case, in 5.5, let's say that you've got this problem. Let's try and work through it right here. So this is a blog post. Maybe you don't want this to show up in your drop-down menu either, which is totally reasonable. You can set it to yes, which means it will no longer show up underneath blog, but it'll still be a valid thing. A valid page. What you can also do, as a 5.5, you can go into your page defaults and hit defaults here. This should work. This is the defaults page for my blog entry page type. You can go into properties for this particular page type, and you can say, anytime I make a page of this type, I want it to exclude from the drop-down menu. And now, if you return to your website and you go underneath blog, if you add a subpage of blog entry, if I add this page, it should be a valid page in my site, but it does not show up in the blog because I have automatically made it so that exclude from drop-down menu the exclude from drop-down menu works. And this was actually a request that had been in there for a while. Page defaults used to work only with blocks. It did not work with page attributes. For a while, it unhelpfully looked as though it worked, but it did not, in fact, work. At this point in 5.5, you can set default attributes for a page, and then when you make a new page of that type, you can it will automatically copy those choices out to the page that you made, and that is a good way of getting around the problem of automatically having to set a bunch of stuff anytime you make a page. You can also use Composer, which gives you the ability to specify certain attributes as being editable when you create a new page type or a new instance of a page, but this is even better because it makes it so that you can set them by default and then you don't even have to see them again. Oscar asks if you could list the latest 5, but under or in an Auto-Nav, like you could in a page list. You could certainly, the way that you can definitely control how you order them. So you could make it so that you list them by your date, and that would work. There are no limit controls to the Auto-Nav by default. So what you would have to do is you would have to modify a custom template to keep track of how far you were in a page or in a loop, and then once it got to 5, you would break. So that might be, and that might actually be a little bit difficult to do in using the Auto-Nav as it currently works, because there's a fair amount of looping and stuff going on and keeping track of what level you're at and stuff like that. So it might be outside the scope of today, but since all this is just PHP, in the view layer, you have a lot of flexibility in terms of what you show and what you don't show. Yeah, and if you did do something like that, I would, you can do that all from within the view layer of a custom template, where it's just, um, where it's just simply, just you just keep track of a particular numeric index or something like that outside of outside of this loop, and then after you get to 5 or whatever, you just stop, or you return or something along those lines. Before, feel free to keep sending more questions if you have them. Um, just a couple notes before we call it quits. If you don't have any more questions, I can mention a couple common pitfalls when working with the Auto-Nav. Um, I would uh, um, I would recommend turning the cache off, as I said. Not only for, if you're changing the Auto-Nav through the site, you shouldn't notice any problems with the cache. But if you're actually trying to make changes to your Auto-Nav custom template from within the CSS or the JavaScript, or changing the way that PHP has a different class or something like that, um, the caching of the Auto-Nav block could bite you, because it won't look to see if that PHP view template has been changed. So then what you're going to get is you're going to be changing classes in your PHP template, and the output of the block has been cached, so it's not even going through that view.php file at that point. So you're going to really want to make sure that you turn the cache off if you're doing anything like that. And then one other thing to note, which is kind of a weird little hiccup and probably something that we will fix in the core, but it's been this way for a long time. The exclude from nav option is not in all cases, or probably in any case, it does not recurse down the tree. So, and this can be a bit of a problem. I'm not entirely sure why this is the case. We built the Auto-Nav block, probably the first iteration of it came about like almost 9 years ago. So it's definitely been subject to some funkiness. What this means is you might sometimes exclude a page from a nav, and then if it has child pages, it may not, it may show those child pages within your nav, depending on some of the use cases and depending on the way that it loops through. So that's definitely been some weirdness. We've noticed this as a problem in the Superfish add-on when working with e-commerce. So when we do our e-commerce stuff, we have a cart and we keep a bunch of pages. We keep them hidden because they're pages, but they're not really, you can't navigate to them directly. And they show up in the nav because even though the cart page, the holder page for those pages is excluded, they show up. They just show up a level back because the page has been excluded. But by the time the Auto-Nav is actually processing the stuff, it's not processing it in it's not traversing down a tree. So it's just looking to see if one of the pages is excluded. But if there are sub pages, it may not necessarily know that, and it may just continue down into the tree showing off those pages. And that was a decision we made at one point for some reason, but I can't imagine why that would be the desired behavior in most cases. So I think we actually may have already addressed this in our bleeding edge branch of concrete5, but that is a major thing to note. A major thing to note. So I would definitely ask that everyone be aware of some of the behavior around the exclude from nav, exclude from nav stuff. Okay, going through some questions. Mixalis says it's nice to include the block ID on multiple accordions on the same page so that the ID works. That's true. You know, depending on the way that, I guess, looking through that code, the ID is kind of, it does use an ID. That was actually kind of one of the reasons why I built this to be a class as opposed to an ID. In theory, you could put multiple drop-down menus on a page, although I don't know how well that would work. But yeah, you're right. You definitely, if you need an ID that's unique and you're doing it from within a block, you definitely, it's nice to be able to use the block ID from within here. And you know, you can do that by I believe BID is actually just a oh, there it is. BID is actually just a variable in the local scope automatically from within a custom template. So B, uppercase I, uppercase D, automatically there. You can just print that out and use that as a unique identifier from within a custom template. Tim says he's looking forward to the cleaned up Auto-Nav code, and when might that be released? You know, I believe this is actually in our GitHub pull request repository at this point, and we've been so busy working on some new stuff for concrete 6 that we haven't had a chance to pull all that stuff in. We also had some back and forth with the author of that code over preserving some backward compatibility. And I think those issues are ironed out. So I believe it's not going to be in the next, you know, the way that we usually do releases, we probably will do another small point release prior to another big release just to iron out some small stuff. But so it probably won't be in that one, but it will be in concrete 5.6, which it will be coming out in some kind of beta capacity, probably in summer. I would say in summer. It's got some other cool stuff too, but it should have the cleaned up Auto-Nav PHP code, which is similar, I believe, to the cleaned up page list code, which I believe we actually already have in there. Yeah, so if you look at view.php page list / view.php, it's much nicer. There's a lot of all of the controllers, like all of the various functions that need to run to create some data happen at the top. There's a lot of documentation here, and then there's you know, some easily you know, some people like the syntax that, you know, uses colons instead of braces. I like braces better, but I have no problem using colons. It seems to be kind of a WordPressy thing, which is totally fine. And so that looks a lot better. And I believe the Auto-Nav follows suit with that. So that will be a nice addition, because the current Auto-Nav code has a lot of stuff. Has a lot of, you can definitely tell it's been around for, a lifetime in the world of the web. Mixalis asks if it's possible to include an image attribute or YouTube link to embed video as a URL. Using page attributes, you can do all sorts of stuff. So you could build a custom Auto-Nav template that for every page it found, it actually looked at a custom attribute for instead of actually linking to a page. So you could, down here, you've got this page link here, and you could add something here that said something like, if go get collection attribute value YouTube URL, this would be just a text attribute that you could add to your system. Page link equals, so you get attribute YouTube URL and actually run some JavaScript. But you can also, you could use the external link for that stuff too. So in the sitemap, you could totally, underneath the about page, instead of adding an actual page to your site, you could add an external link that was a YouTube video, and it actually would take you over to another site. So for example, we could do concrete5.org as an external link. Oops, I guess that is right, huh? And then it shows up in my nav just as everything else might, but it actually takes me over to concrete5.org. Oscar asks, will an include parent page function be implemented? I would think so. I sure hope so. I think that would be a cool pull request. At one point, the code in the edit and add form actually had it in there. I think it was just commented out for some reason. So I'll try and get that in there. I think that's definitely something that we could have in there. Oscar also asks, could it be possible to add attributes to do direct or to do external links? I think you can do external links pretty nicely through just through the UI the way that it works today. But if you wanted an attribute to do it, you could certainly create an external link page attribute and then just modify your custom template to reference it down here. So, you might create an external link collection attribute value, which incidentally, you can also just type get attribute. That's a bit more standard these days, and it's a bit less unwieldy as well. So at this point, my drop-down menu is testing for an external link custom attribute, and it will use that if it's present. Tim, you might consider taking a basic block development class. We actually we typically go through a bit how that we go through that subject a bit in that class, I do believe. Yeah, we go through how blocks, blocks can have an add template and an edit template, but for 90% of them, they're the same. So we go through how to share the same template between both an add and an edit view, and we also go through, how to fork those if you do need that. Well, if there are no more questions, I think that about wraps up the training here. I think we've covered everything that's listed on there, and actually got fairly deep into the Auto-Nav to the point where I've uncovered bugs in it, so that's good. We'll make a note of those and make sure that somebody gets looking at those, because the Auto-Nav is confusing enough without it actually being broken in parts. So we'll approach why that might be the case. Um, but I think hopefully it's been a good intro to how you might build your own custom templates for the Auto-Nav, how you could build drop-down navs, and I encourage you to take a look at the accordion menu add-on if you want to delve more deeply into understanding how you made that work. And maybe the accordion menu as it is would satisfy a number of use cases for a bunch of sites. And then and also make sure to check out that Auto-Nav primer that's in the how-to section. It goes into a lot of detail, most of which is still valid. Um, and uh, and The hard coding of the Auto-Nav is actually in that primer. I would take a look at how at the code snippets should be there. Um, but even with that in mind, I might even uh, there's also a how-to in there on stacks. I would you might consider, instead of hard coding the Auto-Nav directly, you might consider just adding an Auto-Nav block to a stack and then referencing the stack programmatically in your template. There is a how-to on how to do that, and it's 2 lines instead of 6. Not that that matters that much, but since it's a stack, there is a bit more flexibility that it offers there, since you can swap stuff out and things like that. And yeah, thank you all for attending, and hope to see you at some of the other trainings.